for joining me. We were just getting ready and getting a few things ready. As usual, my computer decided that it needed to restart. So, in just a couple of seconds, we are going to start with our Friday Language Alchemy Live. And it seems that we have everything ready. So I want to welcome you for being here in this Friday Language Alchemy Live, whether you are live with me or whether you are watching online. I am so grateful that you are here because that means that you want to communicate with clarity, confidence, and compassion. And I really want to thank you for your presence and for your interest in communicating with more awareness as you go through this life as the adult that you are. And by the way, that's what we're going to talk about today. Today, I am going to teach you how to take your first steps towards growing up your communication. And by the way, for those of you that don't know me or haven't seen me in a while, my name is Alejandra Siroca from languagealchemy.com. And I help people like you to have more peace and more harmony in your life and relationships through transformative communication. So let's dive into this topic of today. I want to ask you first a question. And whether you're watching this live or you're watching the replay, I love for you to type in the answer. Oh, Rebecca, it's so great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. It just gives me so much joy to see your name there. So, as we have been talking about growing up your communication, I'd love for you to answer this question on the chat. When you think about some kind of experience that is really, really, really good for you, and you want to share that experience with another person, what kind of word do you usually use to describe that experience? So type it in the chat. And I can give you a little help. I can give you some adjectives to describe it. Do you use the word fabulous, marvelous? It was a groovy experience. It was amazing. It was sick. It was rad. So type it in the chat. What is the kind of word that you tend to use when you've had a really, really, really good experience and you're telling someone about it? Which of these words, or maybe you use a different word? Okay, fun, awesome, great. And again, if you're watching the replay, you can type that in. Now, consider what would it be like for you to use other words? Would you use the word instead of fun or instead of awesome? Would you use the word it was fabulous or mind blowing, great? Or would you use the word it was rad or this experience was sick? Would you use those words? Would you say this experience was groovy? And let me ask you this. If you did use those words, would it naturally sound like you? So, no, right. It wouldn't sound like you. And that's why you wouldn't use those words. Right. Maybe you would use the word super terrific, as Daza said. Daza, welcome. So great to have you here. So we tend to use words that are sort of familiar to us. Words that we tend to speak in a way that kind of shows our age. You've probably heard the expression when people say something like, oh, by saying this, I'm dating myself, right? You probably heard that expression. And Rebecca, you said, no, you maybe wouldn't use the word sick or something else. It sounds immature to you, but you like the word groovy, right? Okay, yes. So this happens to all of us in our communication because of a linguistic process that's called fossilization. Our ways of speaking and our way of communicating gets fossilized in our mind, just like a plant or an animal can harden on a surface like a rock and get fossilized there, creating a hard imprint, the same thing happens for us. In linguistic, we call that fossilization. Our language leaves an impression in our minds, it hardens in our neural connections. And this happens especially during our first 7 years of life, when we are learning to speak, when we're learning to communicate with others using language, when we are learning to coexist and to collaborate with the human beings that take care of us or that took care of us when we were from 0 to 7. And we want to convince those human beings to keep taking care of us. And that's why we use the same ways in which they're teaching us to communicate. And during this time, during the 7 years of life, depending on what our early caregivers found uncomfortable or what they struggled expressing, we learn that some things are hard to say. We learn that some things are difficult to say out loud and to express to others. So for some of us, it might be expressing our needs out loud, or being vulnerable, or setting a boundary. Just to give you a few examples of what my clients come to me and say, this is what's difficult for me to communicate. That means, you're human, because during their first 7 years of life, their caregivers found it difficult when they communicated in those ways. So, what happens is that later on we start communicating in these uncomfortable situations. When these situations present themselves to us in life, we communicate in the same way because our communication has become fossilized. So, for example, if it's uncomfortable for us to share our feelings, because we've heard again and again when we were young, oh, you are too sensitive, or that's not a big deal, or our caregivers would shut us down when we needed or wanted to share our feelings, when we had big feelings coming up, or maybe we were made fun of or shamed for our feelings or ignored when we needed to express our feelings or we were expressing our feelings. We may find it hard right now to find the words to express our feelings. And so, what we do is that we shut our feelings off, we shut them off. And let's say that when we need to express our feelings, what we do instead is maybe we express our thoughts and not our feelings. Or we feel so numb and so alienated from our feelings that the only words that come up when we're communicating with another person and we want to share our feelings are good or bad, which, by the way, feeling good or feeling bad are not feelings. So when we do this enough times, this language gets fossilized in our minds for these kind of situations. And so you may wonder, so what, Alejandra? Why does this matter to me? Well, let's say that you are that person who has a hard time communicating your feelings, that you were shut down, you were shamed for. And thank you, Rebecca, for finding this distinction, a great distinction. So let's say that now you are in a romantic relationship. And not only that, you want this relationship with your partner to be intimate, you want it to be long lasting, you want it to be a meaningful and deep relationship. And so let's say that your partner wants and needs to know how you feel about them, how you feel about yourself, how you feel in the relationship, how you feel in a particular experience that you're having together. And so when they ask you how you feel, your response is a fossilized response. So you express yourself saying some thoughts. Well, I think this is going well, which is not really expressing your feelings, especially if you want an intimate, meaningful, thriving, long lasting relationship, intimate relationship. Or maybe you express by saying it's good or it's bad. And that kind of response is a superficial response that doesn't give you the meaningful relationship you want. It gives you a superficial relationship. And so then maybe your partner says, I want to know more. I really don't know how you feel, and I need to know how you feel. So this is when fossilization is important to know, when it can get us in trouble. Because the one who's communicating there in that moment is not the adult you who's watching this live, who's participating here, who's considering these ideas. It's actually the fossilized you, the linguistically fossilized you, which is a much younger version of yourself. And those ways in which you learn to communicate that got fossilized most likely were useful before, but right now they are unhelpful. So in this case, what we need to do is that we need to grow up our communication so that we can defossilize it, if you will. That's a word that I just made up. Now, how do we do that? How do we defossilize our communication? How do we grow up our communication? We start with our internal dialogue. We start with ourselves before we say anything out loud externally to the other person. And the first two steps, just like when we're learning how to walk and we take steps, the first two steps that we use are asking ourselves two questions. And the first question is, what is my intention here, right now, in this moment, in this relationship, in this situation? And the second question is, how else can I say this? So let's go back to the example of you not being able to express your feelings. If you asked yourself, what's my intention here in this moment, in this relationship? Maybe your answer is, well, my intention is to be able to have an intimate, deep, and meaningful relationship with my partner. And let's say that then you ask yourself the second question. How else can I communicate this when my partner asks me how I feel about them or how I feel about the relationship? And as you're thinking about it and you're communicating with yourself in your internal dialogue, you might say to yourself, well, the truth is, like, I don't know yet how to communicate this, but I'd like to learn. See, asking yourself these questions and working with yourself, communicating with yourself first in your internal dialogue, help you have the awareness, the clarity, and choice about what you can actually say out loud, in this case, to your partner, instead of simply saying the same thing again and again because it has been linguistically fossilized in your mind. So try this. Think about some of the things that have been fossilized for you. The easiest way to know that is what's hard for you to say, what's hard for you to communicate, and you'll have the answer as to what got fossilized in your mind. And so try it, share it with me. You can reach out to me by going to my website, languagealchemy.com, and you can go to the contact page and shoot me a message. Let me know how this goes, or you can DM me here during this in this live or through this platform. And I will see you next Friday on the next live. Again, 12:30 Pacific time, 3:30 Eastern time. And next Friday, I'm going to teach you whether or not you are communicating skillfully right now. Thank you so much for joining me. And remember, you have the power, the tools, and the capacity to communicate as the adult that you are. And you can start right now. Bye. Happy Friday.